Dale fumbled with the carving knife, the turkey a mangled wreck on the platter, gravy splattering onto Aunt Carol's pristine tablecloth. My face burned, a cold knot tightening in my gut as the hushed titters spread through the dining room. I snatched the knife, the weight of his incompetence suddenly heavy in my hand. He stood there, shoulders slumped, exposed, and useless. "Some men are just better with a checkbook, darling," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. My younger self, still raw and unformed, had packed a single suitcase and left Iowa with a clear vision. A life that wasn't bound by the expectations of the women who came before me. Independence wasn't just a word, it was the sharp scent of the city, the hum of the L train, the feeling of my own paycheck in my hand, marriage, children, a tidy suburban house. These were the things I'd quietly pushed aside, seeking something larger, something undefined, but certainly not domestic. Chicago offered anonymity, a chance to build myself without the constant whisper of what a good girl should be. Dale joined our department 6 months after I did. He was from Michigan, new to the city, and carried himself with the quiet hesitancy of someone always bracing for impact. He was slight, with kind eyes that often looked anywhere but directly at you. His cubicle was 2 rows over, and our interactions were limited to polite nods in the break room or shared elevators. He spoke little, listening more, often fiddling with the stapler on his desk during meetings, a nervous habit that struck me as both endearing and a little sad. He seemed to navigate the bustling office like a deer in a new forest, constantly on alert. The office Christmas party that year was held in a rented loft downtown, strung with fairy lights and the smell of cheap pine. The usual corporate chatter filled the air, the polite laughter punctuated by the clinking of glasses. I'd had 2 glasses of something bubbly, feeling a boldness that the fluorescent lights of the office usually kept in check. Dale was standing near the appetizers, hovering by the cheese plate as if seeking refuge. He wore a stiff blue blazer that looked a size too big for his frame. I decided right then, this was my chance. I walked over, a small smile already on my face. "Dale, right? From accounting?" He startled, almost dropping a cracker. His cheeks flushed a light pink. "Yes, that's me. Mabel, isn't it? The one and only," I said, leaning in a little closer. The music was loud. "You look like you're about to make a run for the exit." He offered a nervous chuckle. "Just enjoying the—" "Relax," I said, my voice dropping, a playful edge to it. "I don't bite. Unless you want me to." His eyes widened slightly then, and I knew I had his attention. We talked for hours after that, moving away from the crowd, finding a quiet corner near a frosty window overlooking the city lights. He confessed his nervousness about Chicago, the big changes, the new job. He was kind, genuinely interested in what I had to say. But beneath it all, I sensed a profound lack of confidence, a quiet eagerness to please. He was like a blank canvas, waiting for someone to paint a picture. I felt a subtle tug, a sense of opportunity. The romance moved quickly, a blur of dinners and weekend excursions. He was always on time, always held the door, always asked if I was comfortable. We were engaged in 6 months, married within a year. It was a whirlwind, the kind that swept you up before you could really think it through, before the practicalities began to settle in. There was a quiet satisfaction in his compliance, a subtle pleasure in the way he would agree to my suggestions, or simply ask, "What do you need, Mabel?" It started with small things. "Dale, could you pick up my dry cleaning on your way home?" Or, "Can you make reservations for Saturday? Somewhere nice." He never questioned, never hesitated. He just did it, returning with a slight smile, as if pleased to have helped. I began to like the feeling of having someone at my beck and call, a steady presence ready to anticipate my needs. It wasn't about control, not exactly, but more about efficiency, about making life run smoother. There was a quiet power in it, a sense of having engineered my own convenience. The requests began to morph, subtle shifts in tone, in expectation. "Dale, the laundry isn't quite folded right. The shirts will wrinkle like this." Or, "The pantry needs reorganizing. These cans are all over the place." Even his eating habits became a subject. "You're chewing so loudly, darling. Can you try to be a bit more mindful?" He wouldn't argue. He would just look down, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, and then murmur, "Sorry, Mabel. I'll try harder." And he always did. He always tried harder. Years into our marriage, the house had become my domain, a well-oiled machine operating precisely to my specifications. I had cultivated a rhythm, a cadence to our days, and Dale moved within it like a diligent, well-trained attendant. The sharp edges of early ambition had softened into the comfortable contours of domestic authority. I was the architect of our shared life, and he, the skilled builder. My place felt secure, earned, the quiet hum of the dishwasher, the precise alignment of books on the shelf, the absence of dust. These were small victories, daily affirmations of a life under control. Saturday mornings often began the same way. The first light would filter through the heavy bedroom curtains, painting pale stripes across the carpet. I would stretch, savoring the warmth of the duvet, and then, without opening my eyes, my voice would cut through the quiet. "Dale." I'd call out, not loudly, but with an unmistakable expectation. "Dale, bring me my coffee." Within minutes, the soft pad of his bare feet would approach the bedside. I'd crack open one eye, and there he would be, a steaming mug held carefully in both hands, the ceramic a pristine white against his slightly reddened knuckles. He'd place it gently on the nightstand, the quiet clink of porcelain against wood. The aroma of dark roast would curl into the air, promising the start of another perfectly managed day. He'd often linger for a moment, waiting, a slight crease between his brows, before turning to begin his own day in the kitchen. I reached for the mug, the warmth seeping into my fingers, and took a slow, considered sip. My brow furrowed. The coffee was too dark, too strong, an acidic punch to the back of my tongue. I pulled the mug away, a faint grimace touching my lips. "Ah," I sighed, setting the cup back down a little too firmly. "This is too bitter, Dale. Did you use the French roast? I told you just yesterday, the Colombian blend. That lighter one, remember?" His face, which had been relaxed just moments before, fell. The small crease between his brows deepened. "Oh, I thought I did, Mabel. I must have grabbed the wrong bag. I'm sorry. I'll make you another cup right away." His voice was soft, already laced with apology. He turned, his movements quick, eager to rectify his error, to erase the disappointment from my face. As he began to pivot towards the door, I added, my voice still level, though with an underlying current of instruction. "And don't forget, we have dinner with the Millers tonight, 7 o'clock. Make sure you wear the blue shirt I like. The one that doesn't make you look so chunky. The one with the fine stripe, not the solid." He paused, halfway through his turn, his shoulders slumping perceptibly. He stood there for a beat, his back to me, before a quiet, almost inaudible, "Yes, dear," drifted back across the room. Then he was gone. The quiet thud of the bedroom door closing marking his departure. I settled back against the pillows, pulling the duvet higher. A faint, fleeting twinge of something that might have been guilt flickered within me. A tiny ember quickly snuffed out. It wasn't unkindness, it was simply how things worked. Someone had to maintain order, to ensure the smooth running of our lives, to keep things presentable. And Dale, for all his good intentions, often required a gentle nudge, a firm hand. This was our arrangement, the unspoken agreement we had built over the years. It felt natural, powerful even. I was comfortable in this position, certain of its rightness. Life was good, it was stable, it felt unshakable. The first real crack appeared 3 years into our marriage, not in the quiet intimacy of our home, but at a dinner party hosted by my boss, a man named Henderson, who appreciated a sharp wit and a good story. We were surrounded by polished professionals, the kind of people who understood the subtle hierarchies of corporate life and who expected a certain level of performance even at a social gathering. I was in rare form that night, feeling the ease of good conversation, the low hum of recognition from my peers. The wine had loosened my tongue, but also sharpened my observations. I was holding court, recounting a minor domestic incident, painting it with broad, humorous strokes. My gaze drifted to Dale, who was quietly nursing a bourbon in an armchair, listening with his usual subdued attention. He was dressed in the blue striped shirt I'd picked out, looking perfectly acceptable, if a little unremarkable. You should have seen Dale trying to change a light bulb last week. I laughed, gesturing vaguely in his direction. The small group around me chuckled, expectant. He nearly electrocuted himself, I swear. Sparked right out of the socket. Sometimes, I added, my voice carrying a note of playful exasperation. Sometimes I don't know how he'd survive without me. The laughter that followed was polite, perhaps a little forced. I noticed a few quick, almost imperceptible glances exchanged between Henderson's wife and another woman from the office, a flicker of something in their eyes, a momentary dip in their smiles. It was fleeting, easily dismissed, but it registered. I turned back to Dale, expecting a soft smile, a shrug of resigned amusement. Instead, the hurt in his eyes was unmistakable, a dark, silent accusation. It was a brief, raw glimpse, gone as quickly as it appeared, but it caught me off guard. He looked away, focusing intently on the ice melting in his glass. Later that night, back in the quiet sanctuary of our bedroom, the scent of lavender from my bath still lingering in the air, Dale finally spoke. I was applying moisturizer, feeling the cool cream on my skin. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, slowly untying his shoelaces. His voice was barely a whisper, almost lost in the rustle of my silk robe. "Do you really think I'm that incompetent, Mabel?" I stopped, my hand hovering over my cheek. I rolled my eyes, a gesture that felt natural, automatic. "Oh, Dale, don't be so sensitive. It was just a joke." We were just joking around. The idea that he might take it seriously, that it could wound him, struck me as absurd. He didn't look up, still focused on his shoelaces. "It didn't feel like a joke," he muttered, his voice flat. Something flared inside me then, a sudden heat. His quiet defiance, his refusal to simply let it go, pricked at a nerve. "Look," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "If you can't take a little teasing, that's your problem, not mine." I was making conversation. "Now, are you going to keep whining, or are you going to rub my feet like you promised earlier?" The demand hung in the air, a test, a reassertion of the established order. His jaw clenched, a muscle working beneath his skin. He didn't say anything. Didn't offer another protest. He simply pushed off the bed, walked over to where I sat on the vanity stool, and knelt. He took my foot in his hands, his touch cool, almost clinical, and began to massage. His fingers worked over the arch, the heel, the toes. I closed my eyes, trying to ignore the lingering image of his wounded gaze, the silent accusation. The pressure of his thumbs on my aching instep was familiar, comforting even. But it couldn't quite banish the nagging feeling that something, however small, had irrevocably shifted. The dinner party incident, with its lingering echo of hurt in Dale's eyes, felt like a small breach in a dam. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, a trickle began. I started to notice things, small acts of what I initially dismissed as forgetfulness, then later, a more deliberate kind of omission. He would forget to pick up the dry cleaning, or he would load the dishwasher in a haphazard way that went against my specific instructions, plates stacked unevenly, glasses facing the wrong direction. The garbage, which he had always faithfully taken out on Tuesday nights, would occasionally sit, overflowing. Until Wednesday morning, my initial reaction was annoyance, followed by a quick, sharp reminder. "Dale, the dry cleaning?" Or honestly, "Dale, how many times have I shown you how to load this machine?" He would offer a quiet apology, a familiar shrug, and rectify the error. But the frequency of these small lapses gnawed at me. A deeper unease began to settle in, a subtle shift in the air that was hard to pinpoint. It wasn't just absent-mindedness, it was something else, something I couldn't quite grasp. Then came the memorable day. I walked through the front door, the weight of a long day at the office still clinging to me. The house was quiet, too quiet. Usually, by this time, the gentle aroma of something simmering on the stove would greet me, or the low thrum of the washing machine would signal chores in progress. Instead, silence. I found Dale in the living room, sprawled on the sofa, a remote control in his hand, his eyes fixed on the television screen. The blue glow flickered across his face. "What are you doing?" I demanded, the words sharp with fatigue and a sudden, unexpected irritation. I glanced around. No dinner cooking, no movement in the kitchen. "Where's dinner? And why hasn't the laundry been folded?" "It's been in the dryer all afternoon." He slowly turned his head, his gaze meeting mine. There was a strange glint in his eye, a look I hadn't seen before. Something almost steady. It wasn't defiant, not exactly, but it certainly wasn't apologetic. "Hey, Mabel," he said, his voice calm, almost unnervingly so. "I thought we could order in tonight. I saw that new pizza place opened up down the street." He gestured vaguely with the remote, "and the laundry's still in the dryer. I figured you might want to fold it yourself, since I never do it right anyway." I was momentarily speechless. The air went out of me, leaving a sputtering sound in its wake. "Excuse me?" My voice was thin, incredulous. The sheer audacity of it. He shrugged, a small, almost imperceptible movement, and turned his attention back to the flickering screen. "Just thought I'd save you the trouble of having to redo everything, you know?" Seemed more efficient. His tone was utterly neutral, as if discussing the weather. My anger built. A hot, tight knot in my stomach. The familiar words of reprimand, the sharp criticisms, formed on my tongue before I could launch into the tirade that felt so ready, so justified. The doorbell rang. Dale pushed himself off the sofa, moving with a casualness that infuriated me. "That'll be the pizza," he said, his voice unchanged. He walked towards the front door. "Hope you like pepperoni. I got a large." As he brushed past me, I felt a shiver of unease, cold and distinct. It wasn't just a missed chore or a forgotten instruction. Something fundamental had shifted. The ground beneath my feet felt less solid. The next few weeks felt like walking on glass. Every interaction was charged with a brittle tension, a waiting game. Dale continued his small acts of quiet rebellion, the dishes left to air dry rather than be put away immediately. The lawn mowed on Wednesday instead of Tuesday, a book left open on the kitchen counter after he'd finished breakfast, when I preferred a clean surface. Each instance was a tiny pinprick, a reminder that the predictable rhythm of our life was off-key. I found myself constantly on edge, my gaze sharper, my ears tuned for the next subtle deviation, the next confrontation. I tried everything I knew to bring him back into line, to re-establish the familiar equilibrium. Guilt trips, phrased as concerns for his well-being. "Are you feeling all right, Dale? You seem a little distracted lately." Silent treatments, letting the unspoken weight of my disapproval hang heavy in the air. Even, in a moment of desperation, attempts at seduction, a quiet evening that ended with me trying to draw him close, hoping to reconnect with the physical intimacy that used to be so easy. But nothing worked. He remained subtly resistant, a wall of soft, unyielding indifference. His apologies, when they came, felt hollow, rote. He was present, yes, but he was no longer there. The tension culminated on a particularly dreary, rainy Sunday afternoon. The sky had been weeping all day, a steady, gray drizzle that mirrored the mood inside the house. I had asked Dale to clean out the garage, a task I knew he despised, full of dust and cobwebs and forgotten projects. It was a test, a final push to see if the old dynamic still held. I waited for hours, listening to the rain, the silence of the house. Finally, growing impatient, I pulled on a light jacket and walked through the connecting door. The garage door was up, the dim, wet light filtering in. And there he was, sitting in his old sedan, the engine running, a faint exhaust smell mixing with the damp earth. His hands were on the steering wheel, his gaze fixed straight ahead, not at the overflowing shelves or the boxes piled high, but out into the endless drizzle. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice tight with confusion and a rising anger. He hadn't even started. The dust motes still danced undisturbed in the weak light. He slowly rolled down the window. The sound of the electric motor whirring was loud in the quiet space. His face, usually so mild, was set in a determined expression I had never seen before. His jaw was firm, his eyes clear and direct. "I'm leaving," Mabel, he said, his voice surprisingly steady, completely devoid of the usual tremor or apology. My heart dropped, a cold, leaden weight. Leaving? I stammered, the word catching in my throat. What do you mean, leaving? The rain outside seemed to intensify, drumming against the roof. I mean, done, Dale stated, his eyes holding mine. I can't live like this anymore. I'm not your servant. I'm not your punching bag, and I'm certainly not the bumbling idiot you seem to think I am. Each word was a precise, measured blow, delivered with a quiet certainty that rattled me to my core. Panic rose in my throat, hot and sharp. This wasn't a game. This wasn't another act of passive resistance. Dale, don't be ridiculous, I cried, stepping closer, ignoring the dampness seeping into my slippers. You can't leave. Where will you go? What will you do? The thought of him, alone, adrift, was terrifying. But even more terrifying was the thought of me, alone, in this house. He offered a sad, almost knowing smile, a slight tilt of his head. I don't know, he admitted, his voice softening, but not wavering. But I do know that anywhere is better than here right now. With that, he shifted the gear into reverse. The car lurched backward, slowly, deliberately, backing out of the garage and into the gray, rainy afternoon. I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching him go, the rain soaking my hair, my mouth open in a silent gasp. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The days following Dale's departure were a blur of cold rage and hollow despair. The silence in the house was deafening, amplified by the constant hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the grandfather clock. I called his phone incessantly, sometimes every 5 minutes, my thumb raw from dialing. Each time, the automated voice would deliver the same polite message, sending me straight to voicemail. I left messages, first angry, then pleading, then just confused. He didn't answer. I reached out to his sister in Michigan, a distant cousin in Iowa, even a few of his colleagues at work. No one had seen him, no one knew where he was. It was as if he had simply dissolved into the Midwestern air. The feeling of helplessness was a suffocating blanket, unfamiliar and terrifying. I, Mabel, who always had a plan, always had control, was adrift. Nearly a week later, my phone vibrated, startling me from a fitful sleep. A short, blunt text message from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at Cafe Haven tomorrow at 2 p.m. No name, but I knew. It was Dale. The sudden jolt of adrenaline was overwhelming, a mix of relief and fresh indignation. I spent hours agonizing over what to wear, what to say. Should I be firm, remorseful, indifferent? I tried on 3 different outfits, discarding each one, finally settling on a simple gray sweater and dark jeans, something unassuming. I decided I would let him lead, let him talk first. My heart thumped a nervous, irregular rhythm in my chest. At the cafe, a small, independent place downtown, he was already there, seated at a corner table by the window. The light illuminated his profile, and I saw it immediately. He looked different. His shoulders were broader, his posture straighter, and there was a confidence in the way he held himself that was unsettling. His eyes, usually so quick to defer, met mine directly as I approached. "Hello, Mabel," he said, his voice calm, even. He didn't stand. "Dale," I replied, my voice a little higher than I intended, but I tried to keep it steady. I slid into the chair opposite him. "Where have you been?" "I've been worried sick." The words felt genuine, laced with the anxiety of the past week. He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. "Have you?" he asked, his voice low. "Or have you been angry that your favorite punching bag dared to leave?" I flinched, the words a raw wound. "That's not fair. Of course I've been worried. I love you, Dale, you know that." My voice cracked on the last word. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I knew well, but this time it seemed to carry a different weight. "Do I? Because from where I'm sitting, Mabel, it doesn't feel like love. It feels like control. It feels like a constant criticism, A never-ending list of ways I'm not good enough. We talked for hours. The coffee grew cold in our mugs. Dale, methodical as ever, laid out all the ways I had hurt him, belittled him, disrespected him. He spoke of the quiet humiliations, the public jokes, the relentless demands. He didn't raise his voice, didn't accuse, but simply stated facts, each one a sharp barb to my conscience. I forced myself to listen, to truly hear it. Though each word was a fresh cut, it was painful. The raw truth of his perspective. A mirror reflecting a version of myself I hadn't wanted to see. He finally leaned back, his gaze steady. I didn't want a divorce, Mabel. That's not why I left. But I can't come back unless things change. Really change. Tears streamed down my face, hot and stinging. I understand. I choked out, my voice thick. I'll do anything, Dale. Just please come home. The thought of him walking out, truly walking out, was suddenly unbearable. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine, his touch surprisingly gentle. It's not going to be easy, Mabel, he said, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. We both have a lot of work to do, a lot to learn. Are you sure you're ready for that? I squeezed his hand, the small gesture of fragile lifeline. A glimmer of hope, small but persistent, returned to my chest. I'm sure, I whispered, meaning it with every fiber of my being. Dale came home, but the house felt different. A quiet tension replacing the old rhythms. The next few months were some of the hardest of my life. We began marriage counseling, confronting ugly truths about my need for control, my insecurities, how I'd used Dale. Old habits died hard. I slipped back, but Dale, no longer passive, called me out every time. One rainy Tuesday, I snapped at him over misplaced keys. He stood his ground. No, Mabel, he stated, calm but firm. You don't get to talk to me like that anymore. If you're upset, we discuss it like adults. I won't be your verbal punching bag. The familiar anger surged, but I forced myself to truly hear his words. You're right, I said, a difficult admission. I'm sorry. Can we start this conversation over? The look of surprise, followed by quiet pride on his face, was worth every bit of my swallowed pride. Slowly, painstakingly, we began to rebuild. It was not easy, and there were times I wanted to give up, but the work continued, day by day, breath by breath, a difficult, earned hope guiding us forward. The house, once a reflection of my rigid order, now breathed with a different kind of life. Dale was home, yes, but the easy certainty of my rule was gone, replaced by a constant, quiet negotiation. The days since his return hadn't been a sudden return to bliss, but a slow, careful tending of fragile ground. Counseling sessions, sometimes weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, became a strange kind of sustenance. I learned to hear my own voice, sharp and demanding, before the words fully formed. I learned to recognize the flinch in Dale's eyes, the subtle tightening of his jaw, and to pull back. Old habits, like weeds, still tried to push through. There were mornings when the urge to correct, to control, felt overwhelming. But Dale, in his newfound steadiness, wouldn't allow it. His quiet, firm voice, Mabel, that's not how we talk now, became a necessary mirror. The anger, though it flared, was quickly overshadowed by the fear of losing what little we had managed to rebuild. Our love was no longer a given, but a choice, made daily, deliberately. It was harder, less glamorous, but in its struggle, it felt truer. The quiet hope that had glimmered in the cafe had deepened into a resilient, if still tender, commitment.